September 4th, 2025, southern China. A village erased 15,000 people dead, thousands missing after a devastating landslide. Just one day earlier, the whole world had witnessed the largest military parade in China's history. So why, right after such a display of power, did the nation sink into tragedy and what truly turned a peaceful mountain into a deadly nightmare? At dawn, after 3 straight days of heavy rainfall lasting 72 hours, a sudden landslide struck powerful enough to wipe out an entire community within seconds. According to eyewitnesses, the mass of mud and debris moved like a tsunami at speeds of up to 90 kilometers per hour, sweeping away homes, schools, and bridges. In the blink of an eye, 15,000 people were killed, more than 3,500 went missing, and about 25 million cubic meters of earth and rock surged down enough to fill 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. In many areas, the mud was as thick as 10 meters, destroying property, farmland, and infrastructure, with losses reaching at least 10.5 billion US dollars. The main cause of the disaster was a combination of natural forces and human impact. Over 72 hours, an extreme monsoon dropped 700 millimeters of rain, 3 to 4 times the monthly average in the region. This relentless downpour saturated the soil and rock, built up underground water pressure in the weak earth layers, and reduced the mountain's stability. The geology was already fragile, made up mainly of shale and fractured sandstone, which crumbled easily when soaked, greatly increasing the risk of collapse. Beyond natural factors, human activity worsened the risk. Large-scale deforestation for timber and farmland removed the vegetation that once anchored the soil. Infrastructure projects and road construction cut into the mountain slopes, undermining natural foundations. Chinese geologists had already released a report in June 2025, warning that more than 40% of slopes in the area were highly vulnerable to landslides, and that an extreme rain event could trigger widespread collapse. But this warning was ignored in favor of short-term economic gains. Thus, this catastrophe did not happen entirely by surprise, but was the result of risks building up over time: prolonged rainfall saturating soil and rock, weak geological structure, deforestation and construction, weakening the land, and neglect of scientific warnings. When the extreme rains came, the entire slope became a death trap, leading to devastating consequences, similar to the Armero tragedy in Colombia in 1985, when the Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted and mudflows buried more than 23,000 people. This disaster left not only staggering casualty numbers, but also deeply scarred the lives and minds of every family and community, a human tragedy. After the landslide ended, the affected area became a zone of extreme imbalance in infrastructure and livelihoods. An estimated 25 million cubic meters of debris buried houses, schools, and bridges, turning entire neighborhoods into forbidden zones for residents and vehicles. In some places, mud layers as thick as 10 meters completely destroyed all structures, from homes to public facilities such as health clinics, schools, and administrative centers. Transportation networks suffered massive damage. Highways, bridges, and secondary roads were flooded or flattened, completely halting traffic. This directly hampered rescue efforts and the delivery of food and medicine. Power grids were cut off across wide areas, telecommunications were down in many districts, and clean water systems were entirely destroyed. According to preliminary government reports, within just 48 hours after the disaster, access to isolated communities had dropped by more than 70% compared to normal. In terms of population, more than 20,000 people were urgently evacuated to temporary shelters such as schools, warehouses, or community centers in nearby towns. Many relied entirely on aid from the government and NGOs, including food, drinking water, medicine, and basic supplies. Early reports also showed evacuations were uneven, with some remote areas still unreached, creating risks of prolonged shortages and disease outbreaks. Rescue operations faced immense challenges: waist-deep mud, unstable landslide zones, and machinery nearly impossible to operate. Rescue teams mostly dug by hand, with limited specialized vehicles and helicopters dropping food, water, and medical equipment. Heavy rainfall continuing without pause increased the danger of secondary landslides, slowing rescue speed and raising the risk of further losses. The long-term consequences for local communities and the economy were severe. Farmland was buried, many areas lost the ability to farm for months or even years. Basic infrastructure, from roads, electricity, water, and telecommunications to health clinics and schools, needed complete reconstruction. The local economy was disrupted. Small businesses, shops, farms, and production facilities all shut down, causing tens of thousands of residents to lose their income. The disaster also highlighted gaps in disaster risk management and development planning. Scientific warnings about landslide risks before the heavy rains were not fully implemented. Deforestation, slope construction, and farmland expansion had significantly increased the danger. Many geologists pointed out that with effective warning systems and sustainable planning, the loss of life and property could have been greatly reduced. Overall, the consequences of the landslide were not only about deaths and destruction, but also a lesson in disaster management, sustainable development, and emergency response. Recovery of the area would take years and enormous resources from the government, aid organizations, and local communities. At the same time, it required preventive measures against future landslides, from urban planning to forest protection and improvement of disaster warning systems. Immediately after the tragedy, the Chinese government mobilized more than 20,000 soldiers, thousands of vehicles, and military helicopters to reach the scene. Rescue teams worked day and night, set up a temporary command post, divided into grid-based search groups, and prioritized areas like schools and clinics. State television continuously broadcast images of rescue forces, emphasizing the government's response efforts. However, questions about transparency quickly arose. Some witnesses said landslide warnings had been issued months earlier but were not addressed properly. On social media, many posts reflecting reality were deleted, sparking concerns that media was being controlled to soften negative impacts. International reactions came swiftly. The United Nations called for emergency support, and many neighboring countries declared readiness to provide aid. Global newspapers raised the same question: how could a nation that just showcased military might, in the largest parade of its history, appear helpless before a natural disaster? That contrast not only exposed gaps in disaster preparedness, but also reflected political and social challenges between a glamorous image and the fragile reality of remote mountain communities. The tragedy did not end with the loss. It raised urgent questions: where did we go wrong, and what lessons must be learned so such a catastrophe will not happen again? The tragedy not only left behind pain and loss, but also delivered valuable lessons if we are willing to listen. The first lesson: early warnings save lives. Cracks had appeared beforehand, but the alerts were not strong enough to force villagers to evacuate. If modern monitoring systems such as satellite scans, geological sensors, and community alarm sirens had been deployed, thousands of lives might have been spared. The second lesson: respect nature. Deforestation, road building, and reckless resource extraction stripped the mountain of its natural protective layer. When humans intervene excessively without considering ecological balance, nature strikes back in the harshest way. The third lesson: community preparedness. Families with emergency kits, evacuation plans, and internal communication strategies survived the disaster better. Preparedness is not a luxury, but a shield of survival in critical moments. Regular drills like those organized in many countries against earthquakes or hurricanes must become part of daily life in high-risk regions. But this is not just the story of one village in southern China. Worldwide, millions live on mountain slopes and riverbanks where landslide dangers constantly lurk. In South Asia, flash floods in Nepal and India claim thousands of lives every year. In South America, landslides in Brazil have once buried entire towns. These tragedies show that the next landslide is not a question of if it happens, but only when it happens. This disaster is a reminder that preparation and adaptation are no longer choices, but urgent necessities. After days of grief, the biggest question is, how do we prevent the tragedy from repeating? Experts at home and abroad have offered a series of recommendations: replant forests on a large scale to restore the green armor that holds the soil and prevents erosion, ban illegal logging and restrict road construction on mountain slopes to reduce direct impact on geological foundations, relocate residents from high-risk areas, and build safer resettlement zones. Invest in early warning systems combining satellites, geological sensors, and community sirens so people have enough time to evacuate when danger signs appear. Many scientists emphasize if these measures are strictly enforced, China will not only prevent another disaster, but also set a model for other nations with similar terrain. The goal now is not only to deal with the aftermath of one vanished village, but also to protect millions of other lives living on vulnerable mountain slopes. Though the consequences are severe, the proposals for reconstruction and prevention point to a clear direction for the future. If we fail to act, similar tragedies will repeat. The landslide on September 4th, 2025, not only left deep sorrow in China, but also exposed the fragility of communities living in disaster prone regions worldwide. The message for all of us is clear: respect the land, prepare for the worst, and build connected communities so when disaster strikes, no one is left behind. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so more people can learn from this tragedy. And do not forget to leave a comment. Have you ever experienced a natural disaster? How did it change the way you see life? Sharing experiences and raising community awareness can help reduce damage and save more lives in the future.